Welcome back, everybody, to the Dynamic Decisions podcast, where we explore the strategies that drive successful decision-making in the world of business. Why? Because the best decisions come from great conversations. I'm your host, Teasha, CEO of C Model Data, and today we have a leader in media production and communication strategy. His name is Tom. He's the owner of Talex Media and the co-founder of Media Gym. He has an extensive career that spans over 20 years in high-end video production, and he's transitioned from successful career in traditional television to, including working with giants like BBC and MTV and yours truly, Al Roker Entertainment. He did that, and now he's focused on helping businesses and mission-driven organizations to quote unquote humanize their brand through narrative storytelling. So here we are. Thank you so much for being here, Tom. I can't wait to dig in, but I would love just to welcome you to the show and then have you tell us more about you and more about your company.
Thanks, Teasha. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to get to talk to you today, and hopefully share some insights or experiences at the very least from my career, and hopefully it'll help someone. You pretty much covered it. I came from a background in the entertainment industry and television. I spent about 17 years in that business, and then in 2018, the writing was on the wall that the industry was already starting to kind of feel the pains that led to it becoming part of the public perception of the industry in terms of the SAG-AFTRA and WGA strikes of a few years ago. That pain was already starting to be felt internally in 2018, and I decided it was time to leave that industry behind and to pursue greener pastures, so to speak. And in looking for opportunities outside of entertainment, I realized that there was a huge need for businesses to improve their communications, and really that ultimately the mission that I've kind of taken on there is to help reshape how businesses speak to the people that support them, the people that make them possible as brands, right? And to do that through better communications and through narrative storytelling, and to use storytelling and content and messaging as a way to sow the seeds of long-lasting, meaningful relationships between businesses and the people that support them.
A very, very important connection. So here's what I want to understand about this. So when you're working with a business that's really used to corporate videos, the talking head against the white background, the generic testimonials, how do you help them to see that investing in cinematic storytelling isn't just a nice to have? Walk me through maybe a moment when you had to convince a really skeptical CFO that narrative-driven video was worth the budget versus just shooting something really quick and cheap.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, so there's a couple of things that are going on with businesses when it comes to the kinds of content they produce and why they produce the kinds of content they produce. But ultimately, it boils down to, I think, one really significant misstep that a lot of businesses make. And this is a conversation I've had lots of times with leaders at businesses. And that significant misstep is they misunderstand who they're making the content for, and whether or not the content they're making is actually something that the audience that they think they're making it for wants to watch. And so that really is kind of at the heart of the issue. My approach, and again, going back to my entertainment career, my career in that industry, my approach is very audience first. And often the mistake that businesses make is they're making content really for themselves. And it's due in part, sometimes depends on who we're working with, right? So say we're working with the head of the marketing department, right? They want to make content that does two things in an ideal world for them. It performs a bit, right? But really the content that they're making is to try to make their boss happy, right? They want to make content for the CEO. They want to give the CEO what the CEO is looking for. And the problem is what the CEO's relationship to the business or the brand is very different to a potential customer's or the audience's relationship to the business or brand. And so the content you're making for the CEO does not translate, because often inherent in that content is an understanding that the CEO cares about the brand. They care about the business. They care about the outcomes of the company and the success of the company. And the truth is that generally speaking, the audience just doesn't care.
Whew.
You have to give them a reason to care. And that, I think, is the sort of inherent misstep that many brands and businesses make, is they're not making content for their audience, they're making it for themselves.
Okay, you're hired. I just hired you. Okay, just like that. Now, this is really, it's almost business 101 on sometimes, right? Like I think people say the customer first a lot, but I think what you just did was broke down why we need to think about the customer first, but from a lens that's not just outside in, but a lens that's really outside. Like, what is that customer, that audience member, what are they actually thinking? Bump anything you have in mind. It doesn't matter at this time. I think that's phenomenal. It's a great assessment. And I think it's great advice for the audience. So one of the things that you talk about often is legendeering and leading with value. So building communities of raving supporters, going back to what we just talked about. And that's really a beautiful vision. I happen to really love beautiful things. However, there's a real tension because most businesses are operating on a quarterly target, right? I got to meet a number. They need leads right now. They need conversions this month. So when you're creating these deeper narrative pieces that really build long-term brand affinity, how do you navigate conversations with clients who are asking you, but how many leads will this generate by Q4? I mean, have you had any clients that really choose the quick hit marketing video over the story that would actually transform how people see their brand?
This is also a very common conversation that happens. And I got to be honest with you, at the end of the day, often if somebody turns around and says to me, I need this strategy to deliver new leads and drive revenue in the next 3 months, my response to them is, we're probably not a good fit to work together. I have no issue with doing that because at the end of the day, if my clients' values are not aligned with the strategy that we offer, we're going to end up with a bad relationship. We're going to end up with a dissatisfied client. We are going to be dissatisfied that the work that we're sort of cornered ourselves into doing. And ultimately, it's not going to serve either one of us. And so I try to just not enter into those relationships. I also think on a sort of broader philosophical level or sort of historical level, if you look at that tendency for businesses to only be focused on the next quarter's returns, it's historically a result. It goes back to this economist Milton Friedman and his theory on business ethics. Going back to the 1970s. It goes back to policy that was instituted by the Reagan administration. It goes to the way businesses approached quarterly returns, starting with the infamous GE CEO Jack Welch, who's often referred to as the man who broke capitalism. There are a lot of reasons why people do that. I am not a business expert. I do not portray myself as a business expert. I will give this next statement that proviso so that people understand where I'm coming from with it. But I would bet that if you talk to people who have MBAs from prestigious institutions, who have incredible careers in business, they would tell you, I would bet to a person, they would tell you that if your business cannot survive at its current pace for the next 3 months, you have a bad business. Your problem is not content. Your problem is your business model, right? So if you can't survive the next 3 months without a brand new strategy that is going to transform your sales and transform your revenue in the next 3 months, you got a bad business. And I can't fix that with content and with storytelling and by building an audience. But if you've got a stable business and you want to ensure that that business can continue to grow and prosper over the long term, then we can help, because we can help build the community around your brand that will sustain you for a long time to come.
Wow.
So I don't know if that answers your
It
question,
does.
but
You've got the no thank you. That's what I heard. I heard you give them a great, really quick no thank you, and then you work from there. I think it's great. And what the reason why I think it's great is because someone has to tell a business owner these things, right? Someone has to tell the founder who's trying to go from stage to stage in growth these exact things, right? So I'm appreciative of what I'm going to call the nuggets of wisdom coming out of your mouth right now. So I'm really curious about something else, right? So you worked in entertainment. We know in entertainment, the story is everything. You can take these creative risks, you can push boundaries. And now you've got these businesses that you're working with, and some have like compliance concerns or they got brand, quote unquote, brand guidelines, legal reviews. So when you're faced with a client, most powerful story, which might involve them showing some vulnerability, maybe a failure that they learned from or a controversial position that they may have taken, but their legal team is like super nervous. How do you navigate that?
so often, especially when it comes to like compliance, right? Because there are real concerns around and real strict guidelines around what you can say and how you can say things from a compliance perspective, where businesses do have legitimate concerns about running afoul of like the SEC and things like that, especially in like the finance space. So I take those concerns very seriously. You mentioned before the strategy that I created that I call legendeering is centered around this sort of core principle that you should always be leading with value for your audience, that you should be delivering value to them without them having to do anything and without any strings attached to it. And so with that in mind, the way that I navigate that is, if we really are up against an issue that makes telling a story challenging for a client legally because of compliance issues or because of laws surrounding the work that they do and regulations surrounding the work that they do, then my response is, let's tell a different story. Right. And often it just means, instead of telling the story that gets into specifics about the products and services, let's talk about the outcomes instead.
Come on.
Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so rather than like talking about the specific, and I'll just stick with the finance example because it's an easy one, and everybody, I think most people are pretty aware of compliance issues around finance, right? And around the finance industry and giving financial advice, et cetera, et cetera. So instead of talking about products or giving advice, why don't you tell stories about the outcomes that your clients or people that have worked with you have enjoyed as a result of the advice you've given them? So like, you don't have to say exactly what the advice was. You don't have to say exactly what products that they purchased through you, what financial instruments they employed, right? You don't have to get into detail on any of that. Instead, you can talk about the outcomes. And those outcomes, inevitably, that story is going to be more relatable to your audience than the details about the financial instruments anyway. Because other people who are sort of deep in the industry are going to be curious about the details of the financial instruments. But I don't know about you, but I couldn't care less
Mhm.
about the minutia around a Roth IRA. Like, I'm just not
Right.
interested in
Right.
all of those little tiny details. I don't care.
Right.
Right? Does it afford me the outcome down the line that I want?
Yeah.
That's what I care about as a layperson.
You get a ding, 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 ding. You said outcomes. We're very excited about that over here. When we outcomes, 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 for sure. It's all about why. Why does this actually matter to me? So this is great. Another nugget of wisdom for the audience. Okay, so you mentioned that video accounts for 70% of internet traffic and drives purchasing decisions. That same statistic then also means that we're all drowning in video content. So everybody is a storyteller now, especially now that we have smartphones and editing apps and have them all in one. So here is my question. When the market is saturated with video, how do you help clients to understand the difference between content that gets views and content that actually builds the kind of community that you're describing? Are there any signals that tell you when a story will break through versus just adding to the noise?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things when it comes to this. I mean, look, again, kind of going back to my career in television and in entertainment. I mean, I worked in an industry at a time when we had gone from when I first started working in TV in 2001, there were like maybe 100 channels, and by the time I left the industry 17 years later, there were like more than twice as many channels as there had been when I started my career. So I came from an industry where we were constantly fighting for attention. And the solution is to differentiate yourself and also to understand, especially, and this is very applicable in business. It's not necessarily as applicable in the television business model where it was really just a numbers game. Get the most views you can because the higher the number of views, the more you can charge for the advertising space and the more money you can make. Like that's the model. So the view count really matters. The Nielsen rating really matters in that context. But in a business context, it doesn't matter as much because I don't know about your business, but I know for my business and most of the businesses and people in business that I speak to, you don't need millions of customers. In fact, you can't have millions of customers. Right. So getting millions of views doesn't really matter. It shouldn't be a high priority. Like the whole idea of going viral is just something that businesses should not even try to do, let alone be interested in doing, because you're going to end up in a situation where if you get too much attention, you're not going to be able to handle it and you're going to end up letting a lot of people down. So what you should do is figure out exactly who your audience is, create content for that audience, and then employ marketing strategies. And again, I'm not a marketer, right? We create content, we help with messaging and storytelling and narrative development, but I'm not a marketer, so I don't put content in front of the right audiences, right? Like that is the marketing department's job. But we work with marketers and we work with internal marketing departments to help them do that. Because if you do that well, then something that might seem unimpressive in terms of total views online could actually be incredibly impactful for your business. So you don't need millions of views. What you need is content that delivers the right message, that resonates well with your audience, that provides value for them, that is then placed in front of them strategically to drive viewership and to get engagement off the back end of that. So there's a bunch of components that go into it, but view numbers should never be the ultimate goal for a business, and nor should volume. At the end of the day, I think quality beats quantity.
Yeah.
And
Quality. Yeah.
And so you have to be consistent with your strategy, but consistency shouldn't be confused for volume. So like you don't have to post 8 times, like you don't have to share a new piece of content 8 times a day. That is a mistake. If all you're trying to do is attract random clicks or views or impressions on social media, then yeah, that's a good strategy to do that. But if you want to actually grow your business, if you want to actually build relationships with your audience, like at the end of the day, you shouldn't get too caught up in, especially a number like impressions, because if you look at what that metric actually means on social media,
I'm like, what is an impression?
It's basically, it means that it doesn't even mean somebody saw it. What it means is it appeared in someone's feed. Whether or not they saw it, whether or not they interacted with it, whether or not it actually made a legitimate impression in the literal sense of the word, right? Like none of that matters. It just means it appeared in someone's feed, right? So like it is a junk metric.
Yeah, it's a
to
junk
like
metric.
Yeah, it's a total junk metric. So like don't worry about it.
Yeah. Hey, so here's a quick thought for our audience. I want you to think about a brand video that actually moved you versus one that you scrolled past. What was the difference? That's what Tom's talking about. We'd love for you to share your experiences with us using Dynamic Decisions Podcast. Okay, let's jump into my fave part of my podcast, which is to assess how you actually decide. Okay, so we're going to get into your decision-making DNA. I've got 4 different styles here, and I want to see which one resonates with how you actually operate. So after each one, you're going to tell me on a scale of 0 to 100% how much it sounds like you. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay, now here's the thing. there's a little bit of a trick in this, which is that you only get 100% across all four.
Okay.
So you have
So
to
there's
think a
math
little bit.
involved too.
There's a little bit of math because I love math. Everyone who knows me knows I love math. So
Okay.
that's the trick. So here we go. Here's the first one, the humanizer. It's the purpose-driven storyteller. So this is the leader who, before taking on any project, asks, does this humanize business or does it just dress up corporate messaging in prettier packaging? Here's the scenario. A large corporation approaches you. They got a great budget, high visibility. But as you dig into their values and operations, you realize there's a gap between the story they want to tell and the story that their employees would tell. The money's good, but you'd essentially be creating propaganda. That tension between business growth and authentic storytelling, how much does that internal compass guide which clients you take on?
And I don't get to know what all four of them are before I answer.
You do not. I forgot to tell you that. Yeah, you don't. Mm-mm.
That makes it tough because I don't know what the other ones are. I would say I would like to say 70%, but I will be honest. At the end of the day, it really depends on whether or not like the content will do harm rather than like whether or not it would just fail to do good. If you understand like the distinction I'm making there. So I would like to say 70%, but I think realistically, I'm going to give that, which I think is big, given that there are 3 left, I'm going to give that 50%.
Okay. 50% it is. You ready for the next one?
I'm ready.
It's called the planner or architect, the long game builder. So this persona isn't thinking about individual projects. They're thinking about how each decision builds towards something bigger over years. So here's the question. When you're deciding Talex Media's strategy or what to teach in Media Gym, how much are you thinking, what does this look like in 2027 or 2030? Because the media landscape is shifting so fast, AI-generated video, deepfakes, attention spans, fragmenting as we speak. Are you building for the world as it is or the world as it's becoming?
So I think I'm building for the world that it's becoming because I would argue that at the end of the day, what we're focused on is human communication. And no matter how you slice it, people are much slower to change than technology. And so I think that we are relatively future-proofed because our focus is really on people, and the modality that we use will adapt and change with changing technology. But at the end of the day, people don't change as fast. So I think we're okay with that. I would say I'm going to give that 25%. So we're up to 75 with 2 left.
Yes, yes, yes. Here we go. You ready?
Yep.
This one is called the counter or rebel, the convention challenger. This is the person who sees everyone else in an industry doing the same thing and asks, what if we did the opposite? Here's what I mean. The business video world has certain underwritten rules. Keep it under 2 minutes. Always end with a call to action. Show ROI. But what if some of those rules are actually keeping stories from resonating? When you wrote Legendary, were you challenging some of those orthodoxies? How often do you find yourself saying, that's how everyone does it, which is exactly why we should?
I wish I'd saved a little bit more percentage. I'm gonna take a risk, and I'm gonna give this 20%, which leaves 5% for the last style.
Okay, let's see how it holds up. Here's your next one. It is called the data driver or the analyst, the metrics watcher. So this leader wants to see the data, views, engagement rates, conversion metrics, ROI. They want proof that the approach is working. But here's the paradox for storytelling. Some of the most important impacts, brand affinity, trust, becoming top of mind when someone needs your service 6 months from now, those are really hard to measure. You can measure views and click-through rates, but you can measure, we chose this vendor because their video made us feel like they got us. So the question is, how much do you rely on hard data to validate your approach? And when do you trust that immeasurable feeling that says the story is going to work even if I can't prove it yet?
I feel good about the 5% for this because we don't rely on hard data to drive our approach and to drive initial decision making. We do rely on data, and the data that shows up to validate this kind of approach comes again over the long term. Typically you look at anywhere from 6 months to a year before you can really start to see trends emerge in data. So we use case studies, to back up the assertions that we make and to back up the theory and to back up legendeering and our approach. I am not a data-driven marketer, right? Like if I want to be romantic, I'm a storyteller. And so I am very much more focused on the impact that the story we're telling makes on the individual than I am on the ROI, which is not even really measurable in this case. So it's a bit misleading. There are lots of video production agencies out there who would tell you, ROI for this kind of video is this, ROI for that kind of video is that. And at the end of the day, I would argue that they're kind of making those numbers up a little bit because you can't really measure in a reliable way direct ROI between a piece of content like the kind of content we produced in Legendeering and a sale down the line. But you can see trends over time tick up. And I'll just give a really big, easy to point to example for just how successful this can be for a brand over a long period of time. You've heard of Red Bull.
Yep.
I'm sure
Yep.
everybody
It
listening
gives
has
you
heard of Red
wings.
Bull,
Yeah.
right? So Red Bull Media House, right, which we're all kind of familiar with to some extent. We've seen a lot of their things, their content that they've produced over time. If you go to their YouTube channel and you watch their content, you're not going to see somebody cracking a can of Red Bull in the midst of snowboarding in the backcountry or being dropped out of a helicopter or skydiving or wearing a wingsuit or jumping, from the stratosphere out of a balloon, like whatever they're doing, the crazy things that they're doing, these stunts, like they're not cracking a Red Bull in the midst of it because it's not about Red Bull. It's about creating the content for the audience and delivering that content. And so at the end of the day, they understand that tying their brand to the content that their audience wants to watch is the goal. And they've been doing it for a decade plus. They spend millions of dollars a year on production for Red Bull Media House, and they keep doing it year after year. And they're probably not doing it year after year because it doesn't work. Just guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But like they've built an audience of loyal fans, right? Who are excited to support their brand because they appreciate the content and the value that Red Bull has delivered to them through that content over time.
Yeah. That's pretty incredible. Thank you again for another nugget of wisdom. I hope you guys picked it up. I hope you're picking up what he's putting down. So, can I get one final question before we wrap this up? If you could challenge one assumption that most businesses have about video marketing and storytelling, what would it be?
Ooh, if I could challenge one assumption, I would challenge the assumption that prettier is better.
Oh,
Inherently. I think a lot of brands and businesses think that they have to spend big money on high production value content in order to compete. And my argument is that you're better off spending that money to produce more content. This actually made me think of another one now in the middle of this sentence. I just thought of another one. But
but you get one.
uh,
I'm just
I'm going to
kidding.
work it in. I'm going to work it in. I'll make it two. Don't challenge me. Don't challenge me. So, so, but yeah. So they get this impression that they have to spend a ton on really high end, like as you said before, cinematic content that doesn't deliver on story. And really, the focus should be on story first, and then delivering high quality content off of the back of that story. But the story is more important than whether or not it looks polished, right? Because like, look, at the end of the day, like you can put a shine on a car that doesn't run it doesn't make it run. The most important thing for a car is that it gets you from point A to point B.
Mhm.
Secondarily, if you can make it look good while it's doing it, that's great. That's a nice bonus. But the most important thing is that it runs and drives. And so you got to make sure the content runs and drives before you worry about how shiny the paint job is.
That's good. Can't, no shiny paint job if that car don't work. I can absolutely appreciate that. Well, Tom, this has been fantastic. You are really doing something that I think is important in helping businesses to remember that they're made of humans talking to humans, not just brands talking to consumers. So, where can people find you and learn more about Legendaring?
Yeah, thanks. All right, so people can find me on social media if you just search at Talex Media LLC. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You can find us on our website, talexmedia.com. And then for Legendaring, you can learn about Legendaring at legendaring.io. The book is available anywhere books are sold. And I always encourage people to go in, if you got a local bookstore that you like, go in there, order the book through them. But secondarily to that, you can get it through a place like bookshop.org is always a great option ordering a book because they support local bookshops with a part of the proceeds. So
That's awesome. So, to our listeners, if this conversation made you think differently about how your organization tells its story, I'd love to hear about it. We'd love for you to subscribe to the show, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and keep the conversation going using Dynamic Decisions Podcast. And until next time, keep questioning, keep growing, and keep leading with purpose. Thank you so much.